Hello, everyone. Welcome to my lecture. This is Dr. Cowart here, presenting to you today in regards to chiropractic and immune function. We've got a lot of good stuff to talk about here, and if you listen to the radio, there's only a good prelude to this, so stay tuned, buckle up, and hopefully you guys will learn something. So in this presentation today, we're going to cover some big pictures about immune function. What does overall health look like? What kind of statistics are we looking at in regards to people being sick annually? And then we'll also talk about immunity, how does it function, some major players that occur during immune function, and then ultimately, how do we fix those types of issues when immune systems are compromised in regards to like nutrition and chiropractic more specifically. So if you're new to our in-house lectures or our online voiceover recordings lectures, welcome. And if you are not new to our in-house lectures or online video recordings, then this slide should look very familiar to you. This is our triad of health. This is what we do in our office that kind of sets us apart from chiropractic offices. Whereas we look at more than just the spine, we're looking at the total body and how it all interrelates to each other. So within the triad of health, we know that there are three main factors that's going to affect someone's health. First being your structural components. Your structural system of the body usually gets insulted by some sort of injury, whether it be a macro or a micro trauma. And then your chemical components, your biochemistry of the body usually gets insulted, at least in the United States are concerned, typically by someone's diet or an improper diet, if you will. But it can also be biochemical insults such as overtoxicity. I think Flint, Michigan with their water sources, or like say San Francisco with their air pollution, or there was radiation in like 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl. So there's many different aspects that can have a direct effect on someone's biochemical components. And then lastly is your emotional side of things. That is your stress. That is how you perceive the world around you and how you are able to handle your overall environment. And we'll be looking at all three of these components and how it can relate to someone's immunity as we continue on throughout this lecture. The rings here that you see that is encompassing the triad of health, we call those 5 factors. These 5 factors have a direct relationship on how your structural, chemical, and emotional systems in the body work, process, and how they interrelate to each other. The top there being your nervous system, so that's what's going to control everything else in the body. We know that your central nervous system, comprising of your brain, brainstem, spinal cord, produces peripheral nerves, nerve roots that come out of the spinal cord that go through and innervate the rest of the body. So it's that central processing, it's that control system for everything else in the body. Next up, down we have the neurolymphatics. So these are going to be reflexes that have a direct effect on your lymphatic tissue. And as we're going through this lecture within immune function, we're going to see how important your lymphatics are. And then moving right along, we've got your neurovascular. So again, this is going to be another huge piece involving immune function, because it's going to involve directly with your circulatory regulation, all the vascular components within the body to allow the blood to move and flow to where it needs to go, to allow oxygen, nutrients, and in this case, immune cells to get to the target locations that it needs to. The next part up will be your cerebral spinal fluid. I kind of equate this as your lymph and your blood of your nervous system. It's a fluid that surrounds and encompasses your entire brain and spinal cord that allows all the nutrients that the nervous system needs to be able to flow back and forth throughout that spinal canal. within the cranium. And then lastly, the AMC, that's your acupuncture meridian connection. That is your overall energetics in the body and how all of your different organ systems work in harmony together and maintain homeostasis, and how all the different organ systems ebb and flow and work and function into one another. So that way the whole body is working as optimally as possible. Okay, so first let's talk about the importance of your immune system. When your immune system isn't working properly, obviously you'll start to fall ill, you'll get sick, you start contracting, flus, colds, you can start getting more susceptible to infections, whether it be viral or bacterial infections, or maybe even fungal or parasitic infections. So here's some stats here to kind of discuss the prevalence of a decreased immune function. This is taken from the CDC. We see that adults get sick with either the cold or flu 2 to 3 times a year on average. And they also report that children actually get the cold more commonly than that each year, which is quite astounding, really. They also say in the CDC that it takes about 7 to 10 days for the average adult to actually recover from the cold or flu once they've contracted it, which is, more than a week's worth basically of either not working or not being as productive at work as possible. And they say, annually up to 20% of Americans actually do contract the flu. Obviously, in the past 5 years, that number has definitely ebbed and flowed. I think it was in 2018, there was a huge surge of the flu that was really hard to manage. And then there's some sources out there that says that the flu had drastically decreased in the past year amongst the COVID, things of that nature. And then also some stats about the financial costs. Billions of dollars is kind of an arbitrary number, but every single time you look at these types of statistics, every single time you're looking at finances, it's always within the billions of dollars. So they say that a lot of people nationwide end up losing billions of dollars worth of income and revenue from being out and missing work, from being sick with either the cold or the flu. And then also it costs about billions and billions of dollars in healthcare resources to help manage and treat these sick individuals who have the cold and the flus. And these are numbers for annually. So this is billions of dollars annually. So we're talking about getting sick and immunity and how chiropractic can help with immunity, but it's kind of important to really talk about the science behind it. Like, what is immunity? What is your immune function? So the Oxford Dictionary of Immunity is the ability of an organism to resist a particular infection or toxin by the action of specific antibodies or sensitized white blood cells. As we progress through this lecture, we're going to talk a little bit more about how the actual immune system works and produces these antibodies and these white blood cells to be able to fight off these pathogens. All right, so how does your immune system actually work? So a lot of it actually starts within the bone marrow, and within the bone marrow, other things are produced, but we're primarily talking about white blood cells, which are your leukocytes. They're basically the same thing. They're produced in your bone marrow. Then through a series of events, they start to get more specialized in the roles in which they perform different tasks in the body to help your immune system function in different ways. And then once they get more specialized, then they go into the bloodstream and your lymphatic channels. Some will go into the bloodstream, some will go into lymphatic channels. And then that's when they will start looking for antigens. Antigens are basically the triggers, if you will, or like the identifiers of the pathogens. So pathogens being the bad guys that are floating around, like your bacteria, your viruses, your parasites, your fungi. So your antigens are going to be the tags on those pathogens that your leukocytes are going to be looking for. And then once they find those antigens, they'll end up producing antibodies. They'll start killing off of those pathogens. And then once the antibodies are produced to help kill off the pathogens, those antibodies continue to circulate throughout the system, continuing to look for further pathogens, which gives you that future immunity that we're hoping for. So on that last slide, it was kind of a brief overview of kind of how it works, but let's get into more of some of the specifics here. So those white blood cells that are produced in your bone marrow, those leukocytes and white blood cells are the same. I mentioned that they differentiate and become more specialized. So they basically get broken down into two specific groups. One are called phagocytes, and the other one are called lymphocytes. So phagocytes, basically think of Pac-Man and the little ghost that it goes and tries to eat up. So the phagocytes, phago basically means eat, cyte means cell. So basically it kind of opens up and envelops and encases itself over the pathogen and completely engulfs the bad guy, or the critter, if you will. When it does that, it's able to then identify what type of pathogen it's eating or consuming by means of those antigens, and then they're able to send out signals to help the other white blood cells come and take care of the issue. So you've got, I made some reference here of some common phagocytes that you would see typically in blood work. So when you're looking at, different types of white blood cells, not everything that you would see on blood work I listed here, because not all of them are phagocytes, even though they all do have a specific part in your immune function, but I just listed some here that are phagocytes. So your monocytes are going to be the ones who usually take care of your bacteria. Those are going to be your main bigger ones. And then you've got your neutrophils that also help with taking care of the bacteria, and they also are the ones that will fight fungal infections as well. And then you also have your eosinophils. Those are going to be mainly targeting parasites and cancer cells, and it will also help with your basophils, which are non-phagocytic lymphocytes. Those are also going to help with allergic reactions as well. And then the other part of your white blood cells are going to be your lymphocytes. So these cells are going to be the ones that are roaming your lymphatic channels that are going to be helping your immune function. So we have two main types of lymphocytes here. We've got your T cells and your B cells. So your T cells are going to kill infected body cells. What that means is that, so you've got your phagocytes that have gone through and have tackled and engulfed these pathogens. Well, now the T cells will come and kill off those phagocytes, because we want to be able to get rid of the pathogen that it engulfed. However, on the viral side, notice how I haven't mentioned viruses yet. What happens with viruses is that the virus will actually insert itself and replicate within a cell, a normal body cell. And those T cells will actually go and kill off those cells too that finds the cells that have the viruses contained within them. Those T cells are going to be the ones that kills those off as well. And then your B cells are going to be the ones who create the antibodies. So the antibodies are basically your defense mechanism and your future immunity that have basically like this lock and key mechanism, where we talked about the antigens before, the antigens being the tags on the pathogens. So the antigens and the antibodies basically fit like a lock and key. So there is an antigen for that antibody and vice versa. So that's how you're able to get that future immunity, because once those antibodies are produced and they're free floating around, they're going to be constantly looking for those antigens that it can match up with. So that way it can further kill those off in the future now that they've already been produced. So that's how that future immunity happens with the antibodies. So while your body is doing all of these things, producing all of these white blood cells, fighting off all these pathogens, all these bad guys running around your body, Your body is also doing a couple other things. If you have some sort of external source, like say a mosquito bite that potentially could be passing along like a bacterial infection, or like a rabid raccoon bites you or something like that, then your body will begin to like swell around that area to help provide more protective mechanisms. And then obviously your body's going to increase in temperature. You've heard of a fever, right? So what happens with that is that your body innately tries to increase its body temperature. The pathogens can't survive in a high heat temperature. Hence the reason why your body gets over 100 degrees Fahrenheit to help kill off these pathogens. So not only will it help the temperature help kill off the pathogens, what also happens is that some of your normal body cells do start to break down a little bit. That's why they say you shouldn't have a fever for a long period of time, because it can start to shut down your own cells and tissues. However, what happens is when your own cells and tissues do start to get damaged from that increase in temperature, it starts releasing chemical signals to the rest of your white blood cells to bring more of those phagocytes to that area to help kill off the pathogens even further. That's why oftentimes a fever, if your immune system is in check, your fever doesn't last for very long, because it increases it for a short amount of time, brings in the more phagocytes through this process, and is able to kill off the invader much, much faster. So here are some common things that we look at that we see causes a huge decrease in immune function. The first one being decreased vitamin D levels. Obviously, in this geographic area, we commonly see vitamin D levels being very deficient in our first-time brand new patients to the office. And then obviously farther north you go, more likely you are to have a decrease in vitamin D levels, because you do need that sunlight to help convert the biochemistry into your vitamin D3, which is adequate. We do evaluate vitamin D on a lot of our patients, both new and old patients. Your typical lab ranges are going to be from 30 to 100. However, in functional medicine, we usually don't want it anything less than 60 or 70. Anything less than that is usually considered deficiency, and then anything less than 35 is usually super deficient. Vitamin D levels in the instance of immunity is going to be responsible for regulating the function of your B and your T cells along with your antibodies. And of course, vitamin D has a huge responsibility in other functions within the body outside of immunity. The second piece here is an imbalanced diet. So this could mean just deficient in certain nutrients within your diet, or it could just mean a typical American diet where you're eating a lot of processed foods, a lot of sugar, things of that nature. A lot of processed foods is going to constantly tax out your body and increase high amounts of stress, which we definitely don't want. We know stress has a direct impact on a decreased immune function. And then we also know that a huge increase in sugar consumption directly affects your immune function in a negative manner as well. So I think the study goes about like a pound of sugar can decrease your immune function, or make your immune function more sluggish for up to like 5 hours or so. So if you're constantly drinking, sodas and cakes and candies and all that stuff, your immune function is just never going to work as optimally as it needs to. Obviously, anxiety, depression, grief, basically any of your emotional stressors will have a direct impact on immune function. And we'll talk a little bit on the next slide about the cortisol being a stress hormone and how that all interrelates. And then we also have a decrease in physical activity. This also goes with the cortisol conversation that we'll have on the next slide. But basically, you want to have at least 30 minutes of physical activity every day, whether it's walking, jogging, weightlifting, yoga, anything to get off the couch. You want to be able to do that. And lastly, there are certain medications such as biologics that directly impedes your immune function, basically because the biologics are used to treat things that are more like autoimmune type conditions, such as certain arthritides or arthritis, if you will, things of that nature, like psoriasis. And so basically what happens is that those particular biological drugs suppress the immune function so that way it's not so reactive. So that way you're not getting a lot of those symptomatologies like redness or flaky skin, dryness, things of that nature. So obviously those will have a direct effect on your immune system. If you've ever seen those commercials, it always says, don't take this drug if you're planning on getting like a vaccine, or if you are having a decreased immune function, or if you are sick or have the cold or flu. So there's already the warning signs out there for those types of medications. So on the previous slide, I talked about cortisol and stress and how they interrelate. It is a slightly tricky conversation to have because cortisol is naturally anti-inflammatory. However, chronic levels of stress obviously will increase your cortisol levels. However, it's kind of like insulin and sugar, where if you have so much sugar intake, you eventually end up getting insulin resistance, i.e. diabetes. Cortisol is kind of the same way. So if you have constant bombardment of stress, and then your cortisol levels are constantly being elevated over and over and over again, your body kind of becomes resistant to the cortisol levels. And instead of it being a natural inflammatory agent, it then becomes a pro-inflammatory agent because of that resistance. But because of cortisol's naturally anti-inflammatory properties, things that could cause a temporary spike in cortisol can actually be great preventative measures for immunological boosting. Two great things that can cause a short-term low-grade temporary spike in cortisol levels would be exercise and adjustments. Because especially if you do like a high intensity, like HIIT, HIIT, I know is a huge popular one, going out for a jog, weightlifting, anything as opposed to just like light leisurely walking. Even still, light walking can still cause a certain effect of effort, therefore stress on cortisol. That 30-minute, weightlifting or jogging or intermittent sprinting, if you will, or those HIIT exercises can, for a short term boost the cortisol and have an overall anti-inflammatory property, and hence the reason why its efficacy for boosting immune function. And then also, a little bit later, when we get more specifically into the chiropractic, we'll talk about specifically the neural pathway that allows adjustments to increase cortisol levels, again, in that temporary moment of the adjustment, to also help boost the anti-inflammatory properties as well. So another piece that we can be looking at too to help boost immune function is nutrition. Everyone, especially during COVID, was saying, oh, what can I do at home to increase my immune function? What can I do at home? What can I do at home? Obviously nutrition is a huge component of that. Obviously you have every bit of control usually to figure out what you should be eating and not eating at home. You can make a lot of your own foods, things of that nature. So obviously we want to make sure we have adequate levels of vitamin D, as we talked about. It does regulate the B and the T cells and antibody functions, along with a whole other plethora of things outside of the immune functions. Vitamin C is super important in the production of your leukocytes. And then you've got your zinc. Zinc is going to help production of those immune cells, basically all of the immune cells. It has a play in producing all of them. And then also your selenium. Selenium is what's called an antioxidant. So basically, selenium is going to be working in the background to help reduce the need of all of your immune cells, if that makes sense. So since selenium is an antioxidant, it's going to be chasing around and taking care of the free radicals. So that way the immune system can kind of just hang out in the background, do its surveillance, and just kind of be there for you. So it's kind of like that frontline constant defense of having adequate levels of selenium. Then you also have iron. It's kind of the same thing as selenium in a sense. It's used as non-specific immunity. It's really that first line of defense. It really kind of takes care of everything before the immune system gets there. You also want to have adequate levels of proteins, because proteins can be broken down to all your amino acids and they get rebuilt up into other things. You kind of think of them as bags of building blocks, if you will. So you want to make sure that you have adequate levels of protein because it facilitates your T cell functions. And we talked about how important your T cells are. And then fiber is another huge one. So as it says here, it helps convert your immune cells into pro-inflammatory or from pro-inflammatory to anti-inflammatory. Then it also is needed in the gut for your good bacteria, your normal gut flora, to produce your short-chain fatty acids, which is a lot of your first-line immune defense within the intestinal tract as well. So fiber is definitely huge. So that's why usually if you Google what can I do for immune function, one of the things will just say eat plenty of like your vegetables and your fruits, your green leafy vegetables, anything that can give you the high amounts of fiber, because it's going to be good for overall immune function, specifically within the intestinal tract. And lastly, one of the things you can do to boost your immune function is getting regular chiropractic care. Obviously, this is my favorite section of the lecture. So there's many different levels and areas within your body, specifically within the structural system within the bones and your nervous system, that a chiropractor can look at and evaluate for and treat if there's any misalignments or subluxations present. The first area would be cranium, occiput. Occiput is the bone at the base of the skull that is the bridge between the skull and the rest of the spine. Right above where the occiput is before the rest of the nervous system or the spinal cord exits out of the occiput lies your brainstem, and your brainstem is what houses your cranial nerves. And in reference to your body's immune function, the biggest nerve that we're talking about here is cranial nerve 10, which is also known as your vagus nerve. Vagus nerve, Latin means the great wanderer. So basically that means it travels and touches every single organ within the body. So it's going to touch the thymus, it's going to touch the spleen, it's going to touch the intestinal tract. So it's going to touch all different organ systems. And so because of the huge importance of your brainstem and cranial nerve, specifically cranial nerve 10, and cranial nerve 10, by the way, is going to be lower in that brainstem. So it's going to be closer to that occiput and that first cervical vertebra junction. So that shows the efficacy of why upper cervical adjusting and evaluation is super important for the immune function. And then moving down into the spine, you have your thoracic spine, specifically between the segments T5 and T10. If you look at the neurological outputs of those, the anterior horn of the spinal cord, coming from that area of the thoracic spine does touch other organ systems, and two that are really important in reference to immune function is the spleen and the adrenals. You've got a lot of white blood cells that go through the spleen, and we've already talked about how important the adrenals are in reference to production of cortisol. And then again, moving further down into the spine, you've got your upper lumbar and your sacral nerve roots that are have a huge effect on your intestinal tract. Those particular nerve roots do have branches that go and innervate the small and large intestine to help with proper digestion and proper immune function within the intestinal tract. So this part I found really interesting is that neuropathway for cortisol production. So there's actually a lot more steps involved than what I had listed here, hence the kind of ellipses after the first two bullets. I try to make it more simple so you wouldn't get all bogged down in a lot of the specifics of what happens in the neurology. But what happens is that when an adjustment is delivered, basically anywhere in the body, specifically in the spine, a nerve signal goes up into the brain, and then eventually it makes its way over to the prefrontal cortex. Basically, think about like where your forehead is, that part of your brain. And then from there, again, through a few different pit stops along the way, it makes itself over to the hypothalamus, which, if you have listened to my previous lecture on cortisol and adrenal stress and thyroid function, you'll know kind of where I'm going with after this, because once you have the hypothalamus, chemical signaling goes down into the pituitary, which again chemical signaling then goes down into the adrenal glands, and then eventually you'll end up having cortisol production, which, as we talked about before, is going to be an anti-inflammatory agent. So just getting adjusted, even if it isn't specifically to those previous segments that we talked about on the previous slide, just general adjustments will have a direct relationship on anti-inflammatory and immune function optimization, if you will, just by a pure, simple adjustment. So as we're coming to the end of this lecture, some takeaways of how you can make sure your immune system is functioning as optimally as possible, whether it be through cold and flu season, through COVID, through overall just life occurrences and exposures to things. Obviously, you want to make sure you're getting a job. You want to make sure you're eating a proper diet with adequate nutritional value. So you want to make sure everything is balanced, everything is rotationed outwards, and you're not eating the same things over and over again. You want to make sure you're getting proper balance of each different types of macronutrients. You want to minimize stress levels, whether it be meditation, journaling, yoga, going for a walk or hike, grounding, acupuncture, anything you can to help minimize the stress levels. Also be active. Don't be a couch potato. Get up, go out, walk. Right now, it's been some really nice weather lately. You can go out for a walk, run, hike, things of that nature. Anything to do, get outside, do small, lift weights or whatever. If you aren't comfortable going outside, you can stay inside and do all kinds of workout videos on YouTube, whether it be free weights or small hand weights or body weight exercises. They have videos ranging from like 5-minute workouts to full long hours. So there's all kinds of ways to be active. And then, of course, like always, get adjusted. We want to make sure that your nervous system is working as optimally as possible to make sure everything else is working as optimally as possible. Well, I wanted to say thank you to those individuals who listened through the lecture. I really hope you guys learned something out of this and are able to get some really excellent knowledge on how your immune system works and what we can do to help upregulate your immune function. And as a gift to you, for you all who listen through this lecture, we are offering our full orthopedic, neurological, and applied kinesiological exam, plus the complimentary report of finding consultation, which is basically a 2-appointment exam, if you will. That's usually $225. We're offering that to you all if by donating to our charity organization Caring for Others of $99, you'll get that full complimentary exam and report of findings for free, just for that donation. Our charity organization Caring for Others is a 501c3 charity organization that helps provide holistic healthcare to those individuals who can't afford any kind of healthcare, and also grants, scholarships and grants to individuals who want to pursue their education in holistic healthcare further. And it also helps provide us as practitioners the resources needed to be able to go out and further educate the general population, such as what I'm doing here with this lecture today. So again, it's just a donation of $99 to Caring for Others. It gives you that full orthopedic, neurological, and applied kinesiological exam and the report of findings, $225 free of charge. So again, I want to thank you all for attending this lecture, and I look forward to helping you guys upregulate your nervous system and your immune system in the future. Thank you again.